Today we will be talking about money growth and inflation. Alright, so first off, what is inflation? Inflation can be defined as the rate at which prices rise and the purchasing power of money falls. Although inflation seems pretty unimportant, the word itself tends to be the most talked about economic term. Although inflation decreases the purchasing power of money, inflation does not in itself reduce your real purchasing power, and that sounds kind of confusing, and it kind of is, but it'll be talked about more in the next couple of slides. And then a type of extreme inflation is hyperinflation, because hyper is over, and then this is essentially just inflation occurring at very high rates. Alright, so an example of hyperinflation can be seen with Germany during World War I. So during this time, Germany went off the gold standard and received other forms of funding since no one really wanted to borrow to them. Then after the war, Germany was forced to pay back various debts, and they owed $33 billion in US dollars. And then, fun fact, all their debt was finally paid off in 2010, so almost 100 years later. Anyways, so Germany had massive amounts of currency after the war, and this resulted in hyperinflation because it kept printing money, and it really wasn't helping. Alright, so anyways, moving on. Back to the inflation with the purchasing power thing. So like previously mentioned, inflation reduces your purchasing power, but it in itself does not actually reduce your real purchasing power. And so this essentially means, or what does this actually mean? So it all has to do with the principle of monetary neutrality. So picture this, alright? So imagine a worker receives a 10% raise. However, due to inflation of 6%, that raise is really only 4% because 10 minus 6 is 4. So that worker will probably feel cheated, as would anyone else. Yet their real income never really changes, and what your real income is your income or your nominal income adjusted for inflation. So that really never changed, but they still feel cheated, obviously. So why is inflation a problem? There are two types of inflation costs that can hopefully help answer this question. So we have shoe leather costs and menu costs. Alright, so shoe leather costs, first up, these are frequent trips, or where the term came from was just frequent trips to the bank cause your shoes to wear out more quickly. And the literal meaning, or the actual meaning to this, can be defined by ManQ as the resources wasted when inflation encourages people to reduce their money holdings. Or in simpler terms, it's the time and effort wasted when people hold less money to avoid inflation. So one of the examples in the book is a teacher in Bolivia named Edgar Miranda is paid 25 million pesos every month. But there was a lot of hyperinflation in Bolivia at the time. So he got 25 million pesos every month, and due to hyperinflation in Bolivia at the time, he would go to the bank as soon as possible in order to exchange these pesos for US dollars. So he got $50 for the exchange, but if he waited an additional 2 days to have exchanged that, he would have only received $27. This is a waste of resources, since time spent rushing to the bank could have been used more productively, and this is why a low inflation policy is good, because then people are able to use their time and effort more efficiently rather than wasting it on frequent trips to banks in a literal sense, I guess. Alright, and then the next type of costs are the menu costs, and these are defined by ManQ very complexly as the costs of changing prices. So these include the cost of deciding on new prices, printing new price lists, sending new catalogs to customers and dealers, advertising the new prices, and then dealing with customer annoyance at the new prices. So most US firms only change prices once a year due to the low inflation in the US. However, at times of hyperinflation or in countries with high inflation rates in general, prices are probably changed daily or sometimes even several times a day, just because inflation, and they want to keep up with the rest of the economy.
Alright, so moving on, we're going to be talking a little bit about price variability and the misallocation that comes with that. So first of all, no inflation in the economy. What that is pretty much going to mean is that the value of the dollar, that's always going to stay the same. So that's pretty much what that's going to mean. And just for an example, kind of what ManQ uses is that if inflation were to rise 12% each year, 1% per month, and let's say we're at a restaurant, then in that case we would most likely want to go to the restaurant in the later months, because then the prices would be the same, but we would technically be paying a lower price if you're looking at the price level. and pretty much that's going along with menu costs and how that can affect the economy. But prices don't change often. But what inflation does is that inflation creates variability with relative pricing, and pretty much our economy relies heavily on that relative pricing. So when that relative pricing is screwed up and distorted, that means that our economy is not allocating scarce resources efficiently.
All right, so on to inflation-induced tax distortions. So taxes distort incentives, which I'm sure everyone can relate to. So inflation can discourage savings by giving people less return on their capital gains, and capital gains are profits made by selling an asset, and common assets are usually stocks. Um, and this is due to an inflation tax. So if you buy a $10 tax and sell it in the future for $50, your capital gains are $40 because 50 minus 10 is 40. Now imagine the price level of that $10 stock doubled to $20. So if you were to sell it for $50, you would only make 30 because 50 minus 20. But due to inflation taxes, the 30 actually gets taxed as if it were $40 in capital gains, since the tax code does not account for inflation. Thus, this might make people or like cause people to stray from saving. Also, another example of inflation tax distortions or whatever is interest income. So income tax is nominal interest rate earned on your savings, not the real interest rate, and your nominal interest rate or your real interest rate is the nominal interest rate adjusted for inflation. So say you have two economies. You have economy A and you have economy B. Each economy taxes interest income at 25%. Okay, 25%. All right. So in economy A, there is no inflation, and nominal and real interest rates are both 4%. Thus, the real interest rate goes from 4% to 3%. But in economy B, real interest is 4%, but there's an inflation rate of 8%, and thus the nominal interest rate is 12% because your nominal interest rate has inflation with it, so that's 4 plus 8%. Because of this, the real interest goes from 4% to 1%. Now, which economy would you rather save in? The one with returns at 3% or 1%? Obviously, you'd want to go with 3%. So this is why some inflation taxes discourage people from saving.
All right, so for this next section here, what we're going to talk a little bit about is the overall inconvenience of inflation. So to begin, we're just going to kind of use a little example that ManQ uses, and that has to do with the yardstick. So the thing is that the yardstick is just a universal measurement. Everybody uses it a lot in their day-to-day lives. And the point is that if we were to change the length of a yardstick at any point, it would just create a lot of unnecessary problems, and it would create a lot of confusion within our nation and possibly others too. So pretty much what that is getting at is that we wouldn't change like how long a yardstick measures or something like that. So like we want to be careful with the money, because we also wouldn't want that to change either from inflation or deflation, or hopefully not, but even hyperinflation. So pretty much to combat all that inflation or deflation might do, we keep the Federal Reserve, and what they do a lot of the time is that they try to keep the money supply in check from inflation and deflation, so then there's a steady price level. Of course, they can try all they want, but eventually, like, it's never going to reach zero. The price level is never going to be completely even. There's always going to be some kind of fluctuation, just like unemployment or employment, I guess. But due to this, it actually creates some problems, because a lot of profit that is made by firms and industries, these get messed up due to the real values of money either decreasing or increasing. And the problem with this is that all these profits can tell a lot about the economy, and then overall, once these types of profits start to get distorted, this problem with profit overall it starts distorting our overall investment, which is kind of what we talked about yesterday in the savings and investment group. So next up, what we have here is we're just going to be quickly talking about the redistributions of wealth within an economy, and pretty much what this is caused by. This is caused by hyperinflation or unexpected inflation, which pretty much are the same thing, I guess. But in this case, it will help borrowers of money because the real value diminishes for money. So let's say you go to university or something and student loans are $40,000 or something like that. It'd probably be a lot more than that, but I don't know, that's just the only number I could think about. But pretty much what would happen is that in that time, the money would be worth more, but as time goes on, that money would be worth more, less and less and less. So when you eventually have to pay off that debt, it could really help you. And the opposite is actually true when there's deflation. Lenders will actually profit just because the real value of money increases, and this, of course, comes at the cost of borrowers. And if a country has high inflation, usually there's a pattern, and that pattern is that their inflation tends to be very volatile. There is not a single country in the world who has high inflation and has steady rates of inflation. It's always going up or down. At this point, we've kind of established that inflation is kind of obviously a bad thing, but what we haven't established as much is deflation. And actually what can occur with deflation is that in some amounts, in small amounts I guess, it can actually help our economy in some ways because deflation lowers our nominal interest rates, and this therefore lowers the cost of holding money, say holding it in your wallet instead of putting it in your bank account. It'd be fine if you kept it in your wallet a little longer. And at this point, shoe leather costs, which essentially we were talking about earlier, those would be essentially zero. And pretty much this whole idea that there should be moderate deflation within the economy was created by Milton Friedman, and this idea is called the Friedman rule. So the thing is, the problem with deflation is that deflation, in the same way that inflation is sometimes, is normally unexpected. It's not something that you can see coming or you can predict. And in deflation, what happens most of the time is that creditors often benefit over debitors, I guess. So that's pretty much all from this slide.
All right, so on to the Wonderful Wizard of Oz. So a lot of people have seen the movie, and it's based off the children's book from the 1900s written by L. Frank Baum, but no one cares about that. All right, so what a lot of people don't know about the Wizard of Oz is it's actually based off of late 19th century U.S. monetary policy. So during this time, there was a 23% decrease in price level in the economy, and the farmers were hurt, and the farmers were on the west side, and the bankers benefited, and they were on the east side. All right, so the Populist Party at the time wanted to use silver in addition to gold because they believed it would help the farmers, and they thought that by using silver as well as gold, it would have pushed the price level up and reduced the farmers' debt burden. But that clearly didn't happen. The Republican Party ended up winning the election with President William McKinley, and the U.S. stayed on the gold standard. Also, fun fact, Dorothy slippers were originally silver because 19th century monetary policy, but Hollywood wanted to use ruby red because color was pretty poppin' at the time. So yeah.
Do you know what inflation is?
I don't know if I could give you a word-for-word definition, but from my understanding, I believe inflation is the fact that our money changes value over time. And so, like when people say that the dollar today is not as valuable as it once was, like what you can get for $1 now in terms of actual goods or commodities, you wouldn't get as much now as you would have previously because of the value of the dollar.
All right. Where do you believe your money is safer from inflation? In a bank account or in your wallet day to day?
I don't think it should matter because either way, it's a dollar is a dollar, and the value of the dollar is going to change whether it's in physical form or digital form. So I don't think it would matter whether it's sitting in the bank and you're reading it as a digital total on like an app or something, or whether it's a dollar bill in your pocket.
All right. So moving past inflation a little bit, do you know what deflation is?
Well, other than just guessing based on the fact that inflation is changing one direction, deflation's the other. Other than that, no, I don't know if I know how to describe what deflation is.
All right. Yeah. So it's just pretty much the opposite. But yeah, do you think inflation or deflation would be better for you? Deflation being the value of your dollar would actually go up.
Yeah, I think deflation would generally be better because the same dollar bill that you'd be holding and the same dollar bill in your account, if deflation is happening, it's actually would be worth more. So you'd still have the same amount of money, but you should be able to get more with it, or it has more value. Whereas $1,000, if there's a lot of inflation in the next 10 years or 100 years, that dollar is worth less, even though you have the same amount of them if it's sitting in some account, or if you're holding, if it's underneath your mattress in a pile. But with inflation, your value is going down, you get less for it. Deflation, you'd be getting more for that same pile of money under your mattress.
All right.
Do you know what inflation is?
Yes.
All right, can you tell us the definition?
Oh wow, that's tough.
Oh my God.
I guess dude, I don't even know.
This is finance major right here doesn't know what inflation is. All right.
It's hard to explain.
Where do you believe your money is safer from inflation? In a bank account or in your wallet?
Literally my wallet.
Why? How does inflation affect you?
The inflation percentage is higher than like my annual like percentage raise or whatever, then I literally have less purchasing power. So it costs me more money to buy like everyday things.
Alright, last questions, super random. You've seen The Wizard of Oz, obviously. What color are Dorothy's shoes?
Red.
Do you know what the OG color was?
The OG color?
Yeah.
Like not in the movie? Or were they green?
What? No, they were silver.
Oh.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Because, U.S. monetary policy. Alright. We're done here.
You cursed brat! Look what you've done!